Welcome back to another Cellar film review, where today we'll be talking about Longlegs, the latest movie to hit theaters starring my favorite actor, Nicolas Cage. Usually I start off with the plot, but I really need to mention this right away. The biggest takeaway from Longlegs is that if you didn't already know it, Nicolas Cage is on another level of acting. I mean, seriously, I don't think I can really name another talent in Hollywood today that I enjoy watching more than Nicolas Cage. No matter what kind of role, no matter what kind of movie. Nick Cage takes this role as Longlegs and runs away with it right out of the gate and does not look back. It's that 110% effort that he gives, plus a little bit more, like in one of his other performances such as Pig. But enough about that for now. I'm sure we'll come back to Nick Cage in a second. At this point, I'm going to cover the plot of the movie. And honestly, it's pretty bare bones without giving any spoilers. Longlegs follows FBI agent Lee Harker, played by Micah Monroe, as you might know her in the modern classic, It Follows. During this plot, Harker is assigned to the Longlegs murder case, an investigation that has been going on for years trying to track down the Longlegs murderer. The case has gone cold, and for good reason, as none of the murder scenes actually indicate that Longlegs was in the house at the time of the murders. Each event seems to be conducted by the father of the family and then taking himself out afterwards. But the thing that ties Longlegs to these murders is that he leaves a handwritten letter at every scene. So, was he in the house? But he didn't commit the murders. So, how is he being convicted? And big spoiler here, let me tell you, the outcome is not necessarily one you would expect. As the movie progresses, you find out that Longlegs is still considered a serial killer. I mean, so isn't Charles Manson. But instead of being an intellectual type like Hannibal Lecter, Longlegs is a straight-up Satanist, committing all of these murders in some sort of twisted way of worship. Speaking of the Hannibal Lecter comparison, I thought it was pretty obvious that this movie was being marketed as a sort of modern-day Silence of the Lambs. And it was at certain points, but I really didn't expect all of this demonic influence or supernatural styles in the plot of the movie. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because I think that it was handled very well in how they built up the character of Longlegs. I'd say it's a good mix between something like Silence of the Lambs and maybe something like When Evil Lurks. That being said, I do wish there were a few things that were done a bit differently in laying the groundwork for the supernatural element. For example, we really don't know anything about Longlegs as a character. Granted, we know a lot about him in the course of this movie, but anything before as to why he's a Satanist or why he feels that he needs to commit these murders, we genuinely have no clue. And I think that's by design, but maybe if we knew why he had such a reliance on worshipping the devil, then the reasoning behind his murders may have been a bit more clear. But on the other side of that, Longlegs' dedication to worshipping Satan is sort of what reinforces the chaotic nature of his work. Because we don't know where he comes from, because we don't know why he does what he does, the acts that we see him commit in the movie sometimes feel more impactful. And I know I'm contradicting myself here, but I think that's the nature of his character. I guess the inclusion of the supernatural was sort of a twist in the movie, since during the first half it is still so solidly built up as a crime thriller. So including Agent Harker's mother as Longlegs' accomplice kind of felt like it was out of left field. But at the same time, she is always the character that's trying to convince her daughter to say her prayers and protect her from demons. Regardless of the opinions of anybody on these three characters, the triangle that's created between them certainly had a lot of thought that went into it when writing the script. I also would have really liked that if we did get a few more scenes with just Longlegs and explaining his story, if we saw certain things of the devil whispering to him, telling him to do things, rather than just taking his word for it. Seeing as it stands, we sort of just have to trust the murderer and what he says. And modern entertainment media would really have you not trust the murderer. So being forced to do so feels a bit contradictory. I don't necessarily think this movie was scary by basic definitions, but I will say the way that it's set up as a thriller creates an incredible atmosphere of tension. And I myself, being not a huge advocate for jump scares, there were some really solid ones in this movie. The two I can think of specifically is right at the very beginning when Longlegs kneels down to be in frame of the camera before it hard cuts to a title screen. The second being when Harker finds the childhood image that she took of Longlegs, it hard cuts to a sort of negatively colored image of Longlegs. Both of them were highly unexpected but worked so well in creating the tone for the movie. Also, the woman to my left nearly jumped out of her skin at the first one. Looking back on what happens at the end of the movie when you discover that Harker has been satanically possessed by the devil the whole time, or something like that, I feel like Harker should have been a more unreliable narrator, seeing as the possession that's put onto her through the porcelain doll makes her forget most things of her childhood, like the fact that Longlegs was working out of her basement. I think that if that aspect were focused in on a little bit more, it would have made the dynamic between Harker and Longlegs a bit more interesting. Not to say that it wasn't already. If done properly, which it was in this film, the relationship between a serial killer and the agent hunting them is already enticing enough. Especially when these characters get to the inevitable interrogation room scene. Like in Longlegs, the power struggle between one another during this scene is incredibly tense. Longlegs has all of the information that Harker needs, and Harker is the one walking the fine line trying to get it out of him. The script here creates a certain game of cat and mouse that Harker would like to believe that she's in control of, but in reality, Longlegs knows that he holds all the chips. And when you take this into consideration, Longlegs' suicide moments later by banging his head on the table makes it that much more important to the story. At this point, everyone turns against Harker, saying that she's leading them on a wild goose chase of supernatural elements that don't actually exist. And to be honest with you, I'm not even sure she believes herself. Monroe does a fantastic job throughout this entire movie of portraying this anxiety-ridden, unsure about anything agent. She doesn't know where her supposed foresight comes from. She doesn't know how to interact with other people. All she really knows how to do is to be totally obsessive over her work. And yeah, that's what gets her to catch Longlegs. But at the same time, that's what has her murder her mother. That's what has her witness the murder of her commanding officer and his wife. I think that only after her porcelain doll is destroyed is when she begins to overcome that. But at that point, it's really too late for anything to be done. Visually, this movie is utterly striking. The cinematography is incredible, seamlessly shifting between aspect ratios to mimic the Polaroid photographs that are so important in the plot of the movie, to a regular ratio to signal a more contemporary shot. And also, the makeup that they put on Nicolas Cage to create Longlegs is absolutely disgusting and makes the viewer, myself included, so uncomfortable to even just look at it. The way that the makeup makes the audience feel is what makes the audience remember how it looks. That's the first step in creating an icon. I mean, let's just go back to him one more time. Think of Hannibal Lecter. Now tell me you thought of him without the brown muzzle on his face. I bet 90% of you did. And that's because that's part of his iconography. It's like you can't picture Jason Voorhees without the hockey mask. You can't picture Michael Myers without thinking of Captain Kirk. And you can't think of Freddy Krueger without thinking of his glove. Every major name in the horror genre has something associated with them, whether that be a physical object or the way they make the audience feel. In this case, I think Longlegs is the latter. Overall, I'm really happy with Longlegs, and I think that it's a solid movie. And while what I've said here could have been remedied in probably another 20 to 30 minutes of runtime to this only 100-minute long movie, I think that Longlegs will still be remembered as a really terrifying experience. Not necessarily for the content in the movie, but rather the atmosphere that it creates by using the things in the script, the things in front of the cameras, and the way that the characters interact with each other and build relationships. So I think this movie is definitely worth a watch, and when you do, enjoy it, truly. But pay attention to the technical aspects and the way that it makes you feel. And then you'll realize what a real horror movie can do to somebody. Even my dad, stonewalled as he is, said that this movie gave him an uneasy feeling on the ride home. And to finish up, I'll say this. While I don't really know where I'll put Longlegs in my Nicolas Cage Hall of Fame, I do think that this is one of his most iconic roles in recent years. And yes, that's going above Renfield or even The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. I think that his portrayal of Longlegs is just really something that's going to stick in people's minds for the long run. I know it will for me. So until next time, thank you for watching and keep an eye out for the next film review. See you soon.